My name is Jake Thompson. I'm 34 years old and a lighthouse keeper. The most terrifying night of my life happened at the cursed place people call Black Rock Lighthouse, located off the coast of Maine, seemingly abandoned. My story began 1 year ago, in late November. That night the weather was wild. The storm hurled massive waves against the shore, and the wind blew with such force that it felt as if it could rip you from the ground. The weather reports called it a once-in-a-lifetime hurricane, but I couldn't leave the lighthouse. It was my duty to guide the ships. It was nearing midnight. I was on the upper floor of the lighthouse, checking the light mechanism. The sound of crashing waves and the howling wind never ceased. But the most unsettling thing was the screaming. It seemed to come from somewhere around the lighthouse. At first I thought it was just the wind playing tricks on me, but the screams were so distinct that I was certain someone was crying out for help. I rushed to the door and stepped outside. The rain felt like knives slicing my face. I scanned the area, but there was no one. Just the dark rocks and the raging sea. And then I realized the screams were coming from inside the lighthouse. I quickly went back in, but as soon as I stepped inside, the air felt colder. The walls were damp, and it was as if I'd entered a crypt. Footsteps echoed from the upper floor. I knew someone or something was there, but since I had the keys, no one could have entered. At that moment, my rationality began to waver. But whatever it was there. Something was walking on the upper floor, and with each step, the creaking wooden planks sounded closer and closer. First, I took a deep breath to gather my courage. Gripping my flashlight tightly, I began ascending the wooden stairs. My footsteps echoed against the creaking floorboards, making every sound more terrifying. As I climbed higher, the air grew colder, and the inside of the lighthouse became enveloped in a damp mist. When I reached the top floor of the lighthouse, the light mechanism had stopped. This was impossible. It was a system I regularly inspected, and the likelihood of it failing was close to zero. I looked around for any sign of someone, but the room was empty. Yet the shadows on the walls seemed to be moving. Squinting my eyes, I focused intently, and in that moment, my heart felt as though it would leap out of my chest. The shadows cast on the walls formed long, thin silhouettes, unnatural and inhuman. They moved, disappearing too quickly for the eye to follow. Is this a hallucination or real? I asked myself, though I couldn't be certain of the answer. Just then, a deep, resonant voice came from the center of the lighthouse. It wasn't a human voice. It was as though it emanated from the depths of the sea. I distinctly heard it say, "Let me go." The voice was guttural and raspy, but the meaning was clear. My flashlight suddenly went out, leaving me in complete darkness. Panicking, I tried to find the way out, but my feet felt glued to the floor. Taking a deep breath, I tried to stay calm and took a few steps back, feeling for the staircase. But at that moment, I felt an icy breath on the back of my neck. "What are you doing here?" a whispering voice asked. I didn't turn around. I didn't want to. I just ran towards the stairs and began descending. But as I did, I could hear a chilling laughter echoing from below with every step I took. Shaking with fear, I made my way down the stairs and reached the lower level of the lighthouse. There, an old chest that had been sitting in the corner for years caught my attention. I had seen it countless times before, but the thought of opening it had never crossed my mind. This time, however, it felt as if some unseen force was drawing me toward it. I approached the chest and slowly lifted its dusty lid with trembling hands. Inside, I found a yellowed, aged journal, a few candles, and a rusted key. I picked up the journal and began flipping through its pages. The entries belonged to a former keeper of the lighthouse, written many years ago. In his writings, he spoke of a being he called the guardian of the lighthouse. The guardian was a restless spirit, and only blood could appease it. As I read those lines, the lighthouse light flickered back on, but it wasn't the usual bright, reassuring glow. Instead, it cast a crimson hue, bathing the entire room in the color of blood. Panicked, I dropped the journal and looked around. I knew I was no longer alone. Shadows began emerging from the dark corners of the lighthouse, creeping closer to me. Whispering voices surrounded me, saying, "You called us." My legs buckled beneath me, but I couldn't even take a step to flee. It felt as though those shadows had hypnotized me. For a brief moment, I heard my mother's voice. "Jake, leave this place," she said. But my mother had been dead for years. Could it really be her voice? Or was it just my fears playing tricks on me? The line between reality and illusion had completely blurred. At that moment, the shadows on the lighthouse walls coalesced into a massive, humanoid figure made entirely of darkness. Its eyes burned like fire, and its face radiated an indescribable hatred. This had to be the guardian mentioned in the journal. I collapsed to my knees, unable to tear my eyes away from it. "Why are you here?" it growled in a voice that seemed to shake the very air around me. My throat felt dry and I couldn't muster a single word. I was trembling with fear, yet in its fiery gaze, I saw something unexpected: pain and loneliness. This being was once human, perhaps a keeper like me. I remembered the final pages of the journal. To bring the guardian peace, a ritual had to be performed, one that required a sacrifice of my own blood. With trembling hands, I gripped the rusted key and lit the candles from the chest. I decided to carry out the ritual, hoping it would end this nightmare. Using a shard of broken glass, I cut my palm and let a few drops of blood fall onto the ground. I began reciting the incantation from the journal aloud. The whispers grew louder, the wind roared through the lighthouse, and the guardian let out a piercing scream as its shadowy form began to dissolve. It was as if its body, made of pure darkness, was finally disintegrating and finding release. When it was over, the lighthouse returned to its normal state. The light shone brightly, as it always had. The shadows were gone, and the eerie whispers faded into silence. But deep inside, I felt a void. The guardian was gone, yet its pain and loneliness seemed to linger within me. Now, a year later, I still recall that fateful night. And every time the lighthouse beacon flashes across the sea, I can't shake the feeling that its fiery eyes are still watching me.